Hi everybody, it's Annette from The Art of Intuition. And today, I don't really have anything specifically planned, and the sun is right, I have a very bright window right behind me. But this is where we needed to film today, so this is what we're going to film today. A couple things. We're going to be starting our lives on Substack this Friday, so I'm not sure when I'm going to post this on YouTube, but they'll be every Friday through the month of February. I know, at 6 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. So if you want to come to Substack and see us live, you can come to Substack and see us live. And the replays will be over there. I think for a while the replays will be for free, and then eventually they'll go to paid. So let me see, anything else? I'm a bit behind this week. I had a cat that got lost in the snowstorm we had. So I finally found nobody has a paw injury, so I've been trying to nurse him back to health and chase him down because he's a semi-feral outside cat. So it's been a little rough, but I do a lot of homeopathic stuff with them. So if anyone wants a video on some of that stuff, I'm happy to share that. I might go over some of that in the chat tomorrow. It feels appropriate to talk about some stuff that I do for cats. You can't, any animal you really can't touch. Cats you can't touch. Because I'm like a little custodian of the feral cat community in the neighborhood here, so that could be something we can talk about. But other than that, and all the admin out of the way, I want to talk a little bit about, we've talked about the huge death portal that had been opened last June. It was pretty strongly into, we got to January, and we saw a lot of mass deaths, a lot of people exiting, and a lot of people dealing with that and the aftermath of that, and a lot of sudden death, and a lot of people very much struggling with that transitional process. Whether you were the people left behind. I don't really like the term left behind, but that is more of what it feels like, left behind, and dealing with people who are trying to understand that and trying to, I'm out of sorts because I'm not in my normal spot. Being left behind and feeling upset and lost and not knowing what to do, and not, even when people are still hanging on and haven't completely transitioned yet, not wanting to let that person go. And we see that so much because there's such a fear around death, and a fear around someone leaving, and a fear around what happens to them or what happens to the person left behind. I just did an article on Substack about how I'm going to do all of the universal laws and how we defy them in our human consciousness, how we actively go against them. And one of the big ones, when I wrote about the law of rhythm, which is law of attraction, everybody knows that's like the A-lister one. Everyone knows about the law of attraction. Not many people know about the law of rhythm, which goes over upturns and downturns, and how there's a cycle to everything, death and birth, and the seasons, and how, an upturn for one, nature really embodies rhythm, where an upturn for, or a downturn for one species can be an upturn for another. And that's kind of where we kind of, our human consciousness will always check out on that. We don't like the upturn. We just want the upturns. We don't want anything beyond that. We only want the upturns. We don't want any of the downturns. We want everything to be what it's going to be all the time, and always be awesome, and we don't, and when that's not happening, we really panic. And even though we know we can't always, subconsciously we know we can't always have it, we can't have, always have the good times. Once we ascended, it's different, but we're going to focus now just on our human consciousness, on that human, when we're in that phase, and before we start our awakening, before we start our ascension. And usually a lot of these things push us into our awakening because we don't understand why. We don't understand how these things keep happening, and why we feel like we are kind of like a punching bag, and nothing really is going right, and everything seems to be going the wrong way, and we feel like we get downturn after downturn after downturn. And we don't understand. You'll see a lot of people say, well, what am I being punished because I'm not getting any of the upturns? But one thing, when you're writing an article, you can put a lot of stuff in an article, but sometimes I always like a good audio companion to go with it. And maybe this will be some of that audio companion to go with it. we know subconsciously there's going to be a downturn, but those are the things that really push us forward. So before we get to our awakening, even in our awakening, we start looking into the laws of nature and the laws of the universe and understanding what's going on with all these things, but we don't really understand them. And we see them, but we don't understand that our human existence directly goes against them. That's what happens in ascension. Awakening is just we're waking up to all the stuff, and we get more conscious of the energetic realm, and we get into crystals and Reiki and law of attraction and the word manifesting and all those things. But we really don't start to understand how everything works until you start going through your ascension and you start clearing the body of the human programming and you get into a deeper programming to clear, and you start to be able to understand all of the nuances in what we create. And even though we're like, how can we keep getting all these downturns? And you look at other people and like, well, they look like their whole life is an upturn. Like you never see anyone, how do I say this? A lot of what you see from a lot of people is just only the upturns. Because that's all people want to talk about is the upturns. People feel like they're going to be judged for the downturns. We judge ourselves for the downturns. So people don't want to talk about the downturns, That's stuff you talk about with only your very closest friends, not just anybody else. And social media and a lot of that stuff is really kind of brought to the forefront all of the just looking at everyone's upturns. And in comparison, we can feel like, well, why does this keep happening? Remember, when you get into awakening and ascension, you're clearing multidimensional consciousness. You're clearing all of your existences, not just one, not just the one you're in right now. You're clearing karma. You're clearing all the upturns from everywhere else in a sense. And now we're trying to balance it out. So there will be balance. The universe is going to always have balance. That's why in our awakening and our ascension, if you're one way, you go the other way for a long time until you balance out again. If you never said anything, you're going to be talking all the time, in a sense, standing up for yourself if you never did before. Because that's how you're going to achieve balance and understand you have to go the opposite extreme. That's why you kind of go through your awakening where you're kind of saying, I don't understand anything. Where before we conform to it all. Even if we say we were non-conformers, you're still conforming to something that was in a human consciousness. Even if it was on on the fringe of human consciousness, you were still conforming to something. Human consciousness is conforming. That's what it is. You can't be in human consciousness and not be conforming. It's not possible. So as you start to go through this video, I can tell it's going to be everywhere, but that's okay. Because I haven't done one in a while, so it's okay. It's okay. I'll try to rein it in for my live tomorrow night, but having people understand, and when people are in a downturn, the last thing they want to hear is the law of rhythm, and they don't want to hear about that stuff, and we don't want to hear about it either. We have to have compassion for when people are in something, but we don't want to get caught up in the story of something because we know why it's happening. And if you can't see why it's happening yet, eventually once you clear enough of the emotions around what's happening, you will see why it's happening. But you cannot see the why when you're so caught up in the what. Okay? When you're so caught up in everything going on, you can't see why it has to go down that way. Why does it have to happen this way? Why couldn't this be easier? Because this is going to push us forward. And that's how we push forward. In our human consciousness, the downturns push us forward. Now, like I said, ascension's a little different. Ascension, you really don't even get downturns. You get clearings. So, that's a whole different story. That's a different video. But the downturns is what pushes you out of it. Because you start to see that it's really more downturns, really more down than up. Especially when you start getting to, people toward the end and getting in the sunset stage. And you can see it and it, and the people around them who want to hold on to them so bad because they don't want them to go. It's more about the other person. It's not really about the person that's getting ready to transition. It's about everybody else. Because they have the attachment to it and they're upset about it and I see a lot of people trying to go through I don't even call it the stages of grief because that's kind of overplayed in a sense for everything. Now they use it for everything, but what it was initially for was when someone died. And now it's, my gosh, everything, you don't get the job and you're going through some kind of mini stages of grief. It's like journey. Everyone's on a journey. Everyone's doing this. Some of these words are so overplayed. They get so bastardized. We have to be able to understand where someone is and have compassion for that, and not go in with all this, well, this is semi-technically, that's the end of their human template. That's it. That's why. The ego's going through death, and the body has to go with it. When you're still ingrained in human consciousness, they are not separated out. They are the same. So when one goes, the other goes. But when someone is dealing with watching that and dealing with those kind of realities, we have to have compassion for that. But we also don't want to overstep and sacrifice so much of ourselves to be there for people in that situation. Because you can go the opposite with that. You can just kind of become the listening to it. And it doesn't have to be so much physical death. That's kind of what I'm focusing on today. But it could be anything really, and you just keep hearing everything about it. And sometimes that can start to affect our vibration, because when you can see the other side, after a while, it just becomes, they're a victim to it, and then we become a victim to the situation we got to listen to. So then we're a victim to the situation, and they're a victim to what's going on. So yes, it's a way to clear victim energy, but after a while, it does mess with your vibration. It's going to bring your vibration down because we get exhausted with it. And I had some of that myself, pretty much in the fall of last year, and I had to kind of take a step back from a lot of realities and really look at, if I can't show up in my highest aspect, do I need to show up at all? And if it's not appreciated, why am I bothering at all anyway? Because when someone is really ready to open up to higher consciousness and really ready to open up to their soul, in a sense, they'll ask you. And that's the sign they're open. If they're not asking you, they're not open. So you could say the most profound thing ever, and it's going to go on deaf ears. It's not going to matter. There's so many things I can remember saying, and I'm like, oh, that's pretty good. Or someone said to me, and I'm like, oh, that was really great. I should write that down. Either I said it or someone else said it. But because I wasn't open or they weren't open, it didn't matter. You can say the most profound shit ever. If someone's not open, it goes on deaf ears. Don't bother yourself with that. But don't judge them for where they're at either, because everyone's in a different place. Everyone is not. Some people are still on all their upturns and they haven't hit the wall yet. Other people have hit the wall and they're now laying at the wall, trying to pick up the pieces and try to get to the other side of the wall. Other people have hit the wall and picked up the pieces and they started going on, the other side of the wall. They're walking that way. During our ascension process, we see and understand a lot more as we go through the years of that. And, we're not here to drag people with us. We're here to just leave the door open a little bit more than it was when we went through it. And we can leave breadcrumbs for people so they can, one day they'll pick it up and follow. Or we just go and know that when it's their time, they'll be open enough to start looking themselves. And, don't overcompensate. That's a big one now. And that's one of my programs too. You're trying to do too much. It's kind of like, maybe they're not getting it, I'll just say it again. That's also going back into our ego and clearing more ego, because we feel like if we repeat it, it's all of a sudden it's going to get through to somebody. Someone's going to understand it if I just say it 100 times, or if I say it louder, or if I just keep putting it up and putting it out there, they're going to see it and understand it. And that's really not how we see or understand anything. Our soul does not attribute a good or a bad. It is in rhythm. Our soul is always going to be in rhythm with the laws of the universe, and that is the upturns and the downturns. It is never going to be out of balance with that. It is always. So if you have a lot of upturns, that's why we start worrying about the downturn. When is it going to happen? When is that maybe theoretical or actual tornado going to hit my house? Is it this year? Is it next year? When do I go to the doctor and not get the news? That's great. Because I know it's going to happen at some point. It's just, is this my year? Or is this my neighbor's year to have a shit year? That's human, and that's what we lived in, and that's what we're trying to transcend past. But for people who are not, and a lot of us have people in our life that aren't, that's why we're in their life. To show them something else, to show them we care, and to do all those things that no one else is going to do. And I see that a lot, where sometimes you feel like, and I know I feel like that, like if I don't do it, it's just not going to happen. My cat out there with the hurt paw, if I don't go out there and assist, I don't know if anyone else is, and probably not, because a lot of people talk about what they're going to do, but I see very few people doing anything, and sometimes we can get in that mode, and it's okay to understand that, and that's where people are, and it's also okay to say, okay, but I'm going to get out there and do it. I'm going to get out there and try to assist as much as I can, because that's what I feel like I'm supposed to do. You have to follow what your inner guidance says to do, and you can't judge success, failure, compliance is another word you'll see sometimes. I usually don't say compliance, so that's kind of a weird one for me to say, but you can't judge that from human standards. Humans are never going to understand what you do. And human consciousness, and not just when I say human, it's just, someone living from their human consciousness. That's what we all were. At some point, no matter where you are, you might be still in your human consciousness listening to this. Doubtful, but it could happen. And normally you're not going to get attracted to this type of content when you're completely human. You're going to be doing something else till it's your time. A lot of times we want to kind of rag on people because it's not their time. And, why can't they go? Why can't they want to do this? It's not their time. That's it. It's not their time. When it's their time, they'll do it. And then, until then, that's it. There's nothing else past that, really. There's nothing else to say to that. So I'm going to pull a card because I kind of felt like that's what I wanted to do today. Anyway, before I went on that rant, this is actually from my new deck. Really pretty. I got them all redone. I could pull off the Deckables app, but I don't know. Today I like to, sometimes I just like physical cards. I don't know. It's just me. This one kind of flipped over. And so we'll go with that one. And maybe I'll go with, I'll go with the bottom of the deck too. You ever get that feeling that it's like flip it over. The bottom of the deck's the card you want. So I did get, okay, pretty. Stop trying to control this, which is kind of a theme today. We do try to control everything, and we try to control everything in our life and then everybody else's, because we're allowing everyone else to affect us. Once we stop allowing everyone else to affect our field, think about it as your field of consciousness. We're trying to control everybody else because it's affecting our field. We don't like that someone else has to have that downturn. We don't want that to happen. We're sad in a sense. We're clearing sadness that has to go down that way, and we don't want that to happen. But we are trying to control ourselves, and then we try to control everybody else because we just want better, in a sense. We will fight that cycle of that law of rhythm for a long time into our essential process, until we start to understand that's what it takes to clear push a lot of people into awakening, is those downturns, and really sort of harsh downturns, because every time they have a chance to go a different way, they don't. And I know that was me. Every time I had a chance to correct something, I didn't do it. And I knew it. It's kind of that old adage, I know it, but I just didn't do it. Well, if I knew it, I didn't do it, who cared? And then this one, obligation energy, which is a lot of what we've been talking about today, obligation to everybody else. And that's what we have to really work on and clear, because it will affect your field. And when it affects your field, you can't be of use to anybody. You have no energy. You'll have no energy for yourself. You'll have no energy for anything. And you can't show up to assist and be able to see the highest path forward when you can't see it and you can't feel it. All right. Keep practicing the art of intuition.